Hey guys, it's Gregor, aka Leif Erikson. We're doing something a little bit unusual today. I'm going to talk about Scandinavia and the various navies of the early 20th century scattered around the region to see how they could work in World of Warships. So, the vessels of navies in Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and how they'd work in-game. So, Scandinavia was an interesting place during the war. It hosted the fight for the Bismarck's sister ship, Tirpitz, despite the countries in the region having a relatively detached relationship with the mainland conflicts, with the exception of Finland, which was responsible for a lot of fighting against the Soviets and eventually the Nazis, and Denmark, which was invaded and occupied. Scandinavian warships then were built with the intention, for the most part, of defending coastal waters, aptly named coastal defense ships, among sloops and gunboats. There were also many forms of destroyers, and those two classes of ships, the coastal defense ships and the destroyers, are the main things I'll be talking about in this video. So I'll be talking about the coastal defense ships first, considering they're the most unique. The various Nordic countries found them useful to create, since a lot of their territory was spread out over small islands. So while these vessels weren't particularly seaworthy out in open ocean, they were suited to the task. They're a lot like pre-Dreadnought battleships, usually equipped with many different calibers of guns and armor at the cost of speed, although they were quite faster than, say, monitors. Finland had two coastal defense ships during the war, VÄINÄMÖINEN and Ilmarinen. They're built off of similar specifications. Ilmarinen was the flagship of the Finnish Navy from 33 until her demise in 41. Then VÄINÄMÖINEN took her place, to eventually be given to the Russians as a concession at the end of the Second World War. These ships don't look like much on paper, but they were a great effort for a country like Finland to produce, and the Russians tried to sink them with aircraft many, many times, to no fruition. Only Ilmarinen sunk due to hitting mines. Ilmarinen had more armament than VÄINÄMÖINEN, so I'll talk about her exclusively. She's a small ship, only about 93 meters in length, but it was packed to the brim with the armament that you could fit on such a thing. It was very slow, 14.5 knots. In 1941, her armament consisted of 4 254mm Bofors guns in 2 dual mounts, 8 105mm guns in 4 dual mounts, and 4 40mm and 4 20mm cannons as an AA suite. Armor comparable to contemporary armored cruisers, so enough to prevent citadels from low-caliber guns, but that's about it. So where would these ships go? I have no idea. Tier 3 seems like the most logical, but there's no way in hell they'd be able to go against battleships. These ships are purely cruiser and destroyer killers. Anyway, that's enough of the Finns. Denmark also had a coastal defense ship, NIELS JUEL. She was one of many vessels in the Danish fleet that was sunk to prevent the Germans from using them as a part of their forces. NIELS JUEL was slow, characteristically with a top speed of 16 knots. Her armament consisted of 10 150mm guns and 4 57mm anti-aircraft guns. She also had torpedoes, but I doubt they'd be implemented for various reasons. Again, probably Tier 3, like her Finnish counterparts. Sweden also had its own coastal defense ships during the war, the SVERIGE class of ships. 3 of them were built: SVERIGE herself, Queen Victoria, and Gustav V. These vessels were the backbone of the Swedish Navy during the Second World War. I think these ships have a lot more going for them for implementation in World of Warships than the other coastal defense ships we've talked about, frankly. Let's talk about the lead ship, SVERIGE. SVERIGE had a top speed of 22.5 knots. You never thought you'd say that's fast, did you? Armament: 4 283mm cannons in 2 twin turrets, 8 150mm guns in 1 twin turret and 4 single mounts, 6 75mm guns in single mounts, 2 57mm and 2 machine guns for AA defense. Belt armor: 9 inches. Enough to keep from getting penned by even heavy cruisers. Isn't that something? SVERIGE seems like it would be a unique destroyer and cruiser killer, like the rest of her counterparts. I'd probably put her at Tier 3 or Tier 4. Those 11-inch guns probably wouldn't be too accurate, but God help you if you get hit by them. Perhaps this would pave the way for wargaming to introduce a unique sort of 2 main batteries mechanic into World of Warships. So say you hit 1 and you control 1 set of guns, and then hit 2 for another. It's just a thought. Anyway, that's all of your coastal defense ships. The Nordic countries often fielded many kinds of destroyers, though, naturally to move around the narrow straits of the region quickly. Most of your destroyers were made in Norway and Sweden. Let's talk about Norway first. One of Norway's most notable destroyer classes was the SLEIPNER class, originally launched in the 1930s. 6 of these destroyers were made in total. I'm going to talk about Geiler, because it's actually had a reasonable amount of torpedo tubes, 4 of them, as opposed to just 2. Speed was around 32 knots. Main armament consisted of 3 10cm guns, with the 40mm Bofors and a couple 50 cals for the AA suite. These ships were considered fairly advanced for the time at which they were introduced, and I'm not one to judge. I think Geiler would be more likely to be added out of the ships that were made, since, like I said, she actually had a serviceable amount of torpedo tubes, and that is, after all, the main reason people play destroyers in this game. Placement? Either Tier 3 or Tier 4, though I'm leaning towards Tier 3. Any more Norwegian destroyers were American or British designs after this, with Norwegian flags on them. Let's go to the Swedes then. Sweden has some more options concerning destroyers, and they were pretty respectable designs. Here's the... ready for it? Göteborg. Not Göteborg. Class destroyer. I know, Swedish is interesting, isn't it? Commissioned in 1936. 6 of these were made and highly regarded by the Swedes. All of them rebuilt into frigates after the war's end. Armament consisted of 3 120mm guns, not too shabby in terms of caliber, with 4 25mm Bofors as AA guns. Torpedoes? 6 of them. Speed? 39 knots. Pretty quick. These don't seem like bad ships at all, really. These seem like mid, or at least mid-late tier ships, lying somewhere between tiers 5 and 7. Her successor, which I'll get to in a minute, seems similar. I think this class would be lovely as a premium vessel. Replacing the Göteborg was the VISBY class in 1942. Also modified into frigates during the Cold War. 4 of them were made. Designed largely in part to the tune of the Göteborg. 3 120mm guns and 3 single mounts with an improved field of fire, and a decent number of anti-aircraft guns, 4 40mm cannons and 4 20mm cannons. Torpedo tubes consisted of 2 triple mounts. These vessels were also fitted for mine laying, although the game doesn't have mines, so that's a bit of a moot point. Also very quick, 39 knots. Seems like the Swedish shtick with their destroyers would be speed, if anything. I'd talk at length about the Swedes and their destroyers, but then I wouldn't really have much room to talk about other ships in this video. All I can say is that the Swedes have a strong case for a sizable branch of destroyers, and probably wouldn't make a bad addition to World of Warships. We'll wrap up with another Swedish vessel, a cruiser that would make a good premium ship. This is the TRE-KRONOR class. In English, that means 3 crowns. 2 of them were built, the lead ship and her sister vessel, Göta Leon. This vessel marks a distinct departure that the Swedes took in their naval development at the start of World War II. Instead of relying exclusively on destroyers escorted by slow coastal defense ships, the 2 destroyer squadrons that existed could be escorted by these 2 ships instead. These would be potent support ships indeed, 33 knots, reasonably quick for a cruiser. Main armament consisted of 7 152mm guns, characteristic of a light cruiser. 7 25mm as a secondary suite, and 6 torpedo tubes. Anti-aircraft guns? 40mm. 20 of them. Yes, 20. Stick this thing next to a friendly battleship and you'll have a duo untouchable by aircraft, I'm sure. The TRE-KRONOR class seems like it would be a welcome addition to the game as a tier 8 premium to me. And that's all I really have to say about Scandinavia. Some might say that I'm picking at scraps with this series now, and well, Scandinavia, in my eyes, has an audience vocal enough to see not necessarily the implementation of a whole tech tree, really, but at the very least, this makes another distinct case for why a unified European miscellaneous nations tree isn't a bad idea in my eyes. If we can add obscure vessels like the Bliskovikia, who's to say we can't have ships like TRE-KRONOR? I rest my case. Scandinavia has a certainly unique sense of history regarding naval warfare, as I'm sure everybody knows a thing or two about the Vikings. Take that for what you will. I found doing the research for this video an interesting affair, and I hope the video has been interesting to you as well. Anyway, I'll be taking a quick break over the course of 4th of July for holiday festivities here in the US. Shout out to my boys in Canada for something similar, and my friends over the pond in the UK. You gonna be joining us for Independence Day too? Oh, out the turntables. Oh, but that's controversial. I shouldn't talk about that. Welcome to what seems to be the entirety of Europe hating your guts, my British friends. You'll get used to it. But if you ain't got haters, you ain't doing jack. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe for more content like this and give the video a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. It really does go a long way. Until next time, I'm Gregor, and as Swedish Chef would put it, bork, bork, bork. Thanks so much for watching.